Hello and welcome to Sleepy Scientist. I'm glad you're here, whether you've had a long day, a busy mind, or you simply love falling asleep to the sound of science. Tonight we're going to take a journey through time, through dust and dreams, through memory and metamorphosis. We'll explore one of Earth's most iconic landscapes, not as it is now, but as it used to be. Imagine for a moment the Sahara, not dry, not harsh, not golden dunes stretching endlessly, but green, lush, alive. Picture birdsong instead of silence, the rustle of leaves instead of sand, the shimmer of a lake instead of a mirage. If that image feels strange, let it. Let it bloom in your imagination just for tonight. And while you gently settle in, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? What time is it for you right now? Leave a little note if you're cozy enough to share. If you enjoy these sleepy explorations, I'd be so grateful if you gave the video a little like and tap that subscribe button. It helps more sleepy scientists like you find their way here, and it means I can keep making more of these journeys for you now. The sand is soft beneath your feet, but beneath the sand, something stirs. The Sahara is vast, nearly 9.2 million square kilometers of desert stretching across North Africa, more than the size of the United States. To us, it feels eternal, unchanging. But that's only because we're used to thinking in short slices of time. Beneath the rippling dunes, the bones of a different world sleep lightly. Imagine the desert as a giant canvas, every grain of sand a pixel, every layer a memory. And just beneath the surface, a painting waits, a vivid one older than history. In some places, fossilized roots curl through ancient soil preserved in time. Beneath the Libyan desert, geologists have uncovered layers of sediment, silt, not sand, once laid down by rivers now forgotten. These are the fingerprints of a green Sahara, buried but not erased. And sometimes, the desert dreams too loudly to stay quiet. Satellite imagery has revealed strange shapes, like ghost rivers and phantom lakes. These are not tricks of the light. These are the scars of a different climate, stitched into the surface, like the wrinkles of a sleeping giant. You walk across what looks like endless sand, but in your mind's eye let the dust part. Picture roots breaking the surface, ferns uncurling, acacia trees stretching lazily toward the sky. A dragonfly hums nearby, its wings shimmering with water droplets. A herd of gazelle rustles in the distance. The desert remembers, and so does the wind. It whistles not just across dunes, but through time. Sometimes it carries fossilized pollen, proof of ancient forests. Sometimes it brings shards of pottery left behind by people who once called this place home. You might ask yourself, how can something so dry hide so much water, so much life? The answer lies in layers both of earth and of time. The Sahara is like a book, its chapters written in stone, sand, and silence. And tonight, you're going to read it gently, one page at a time. Even now, as you float quietly through this sleeping desert, know this: it was not always sleeping. It once danced with rain. Before we journey further, pause with the sand. Let it shift beneath your thoughts. Let its warmth cradle you. This is the beginning of a much older story than we're used to telling. A story of change, of return, of green roots hidden in golden silence. The first signs are small, a shell found miles from any sea. The fossil of a fish smiling gently from limestone. These are not mistakes, they're whispers. And when you listen closely enough, the Sahara begins to sing. It's a soft melody rising with the wind, curling into your ears like a lullaby. A story of what was, and maybe just maybe what could be again. You begin to move forward, gently, slowly, as though walking along a dream's edge. The golden sands of the Sahara ripple softly beneath your feet, but now your attention drifts upward, skyward and outward. You're not just seeing the desert with your eyes anymore. You're seeing it through the eyes of satellites, of science, of quiet and curious minds who've listened carefully to the land. The Sahara begins to shift beneath that gaze. From space, the desert looks like a canvas that has been brushed over too many times. But if you filter out the present, if you remove the surface dust, what's revealed is astonishing. The shapes of rivers that no longer run, the outlines of lakes that once shimmered beneath a summer sun. It starts with the color. In radar, imaging dry lake beds appear as pale fingerprints, wide and smooth. Some are hundreds of kilometers across. These are not guesses. These are real places, once full of life, now hollowed but not erased. You float above one such place now, the ghost of Lake Megachad. Once it was the largest freshwater lake on Earth, covering an area of over 400,000 square kilometers, nearly the size of the Caspian Sea. Today, all that remains is Lake Chad, a small remnant at the edge of four nations, slowly evaporating. But buried beneath the dunes, the full skeleton of the lake still rests, and just to the north, you can trace the dry bed of the Tamanrasset River, a river that rivaled the Nile. Not a trickle, not a stream. A vast channel carved by water, now filled with sand. It once flowed from the heart of the Atlas Mountains all the way into the Atlantic. Isn't it strange how something so massive could simply vanish? But it didn't happen all at once. No drama, just change. The water left quietly like guests excusing themselves from a long, slow dinner party. The Sahara's past reveals itself in soft layers. Under the desert crust lie thick sequences of sediment. Clay, not sand. These are materials formed in wet conditions, laid down gently by rivers, lakes, and marshes over thousands of years. Scientists dig into these layers with patient hands and find pollen grains from grasslands, microscopic algae from freshwater ponds, and shells from snails that could only have survived in thriving aquatic ecosystems. Let your mind imagine this land not as empty but full. The Central Sahara, now so lifeless, was once so vibrant it supported savannas, forests, and even wetlands. Vegetation covered as much as half of what is now desert. Rain fell often, sometimes dramatically turning dry basins into temporary lakes that teemed with insects, frogs, and birds. It's humbling, isn't it? The idea that a place so dry, so quiet now, once echoed with croaks, buzzes, splashes. That this silence is not ancient, it's recent. And the proof keeps coming. In Niger, researchers discovered ancient shorelines hundreds of meters above today's desert floor. In Egypt, sediments carry signs of repeated flood pulses, traces of lake expansions and retreats, like breath marks left on glass. You might ask yourself, what was the sky like then? How did the clouds drift, the storms, break the moonlight, shimmer on a million tiny ponds? The earth, you'll begin to realize, is not still. It paints and repaints itself in cycles. The Sahara is not a painting, it's a time-lapse. So much of this story is invisible to the casual eye. But once you learn how to see it, it becomes everywhere. In the curves of dry valleys, in the odd shape of a ridge, in the sudden dip of a wadi that once held rain. The Sahara's former paradise is written into its bones. It's also there in the bones of animals, hippos, crocodiles, antelopes, buried in places where there is no water for thousands of kilometers. Their skeletons tell us what the land once looked like, how it smelled, what sounds echoed through its air. And as you hover above this ancient world, you begin to realize the Sahara isn't only a desert. It's a palimpsest, a story half erased but not forgotten. Let the sand swirl around you for a moment. Let the quiet remind you that silence doesn't mean nothingness. Sometimes silence means memory, and sometimes it means something is waiting, waiting to be uncovered, waiting to return, waiting for you to keep listening. Now that your thoughts have settled into the ancient riverbeds and vanished lakes, listen more closely. Do you hear it? That distant rhythm, soft and low, like a slow drumbeat far beyond the dunes. That's the sound of the rain returning. Let yourself drift back in time about 10,000 years to the early Holocene epoch when something remarkable began. The desert you know as Sahara started to change not with a storm, but with a long, gentle invitation. The monsoon was moving north. This was the beginning of the African humid period, a time when the Earth's climate tipped ever so slightly toward green. The rains didn't come with fury. They came with persistence year after year, for thousands of years, shaping a landscape that would surprise even the most seasoned desert traveler today. You find yourself standing in the sand, but it's no longer sand. It's soil damp and rich. Grass reaches up around your ankles. The wind smells of flowers. The air is heavy with humidity. Thunder rolls in the distance, not threatening, but familiar like a lullaby to the land. Why did the rains return? To answer that, you must look to the sky and beyond, to the tilt of the Earth's axis and the sway of its orbit. These gentle celestial wobbles are called Milankovitch cycles, and they work like the planet's breath. During this period, the Earth's tilt increased slightly, and its orbit stretched, bringing more intense summer sunlight to the northern hemisphere. That extra warmth heated the land, especially the vast interior of Africa, creating a low-pressure zone that pulled moist air inland from the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This strengthened the West African monsoon, drawing it hundreds of kilometers deeper into the Sahara. Rain followed warmth, and green followed rain. The change was not just dramatic, it was complete. Once barren lands burst into life. Lakes filled and overflowed. Rivers braided across the plain like silver ribbons. Trees returned. The land transformed into a vast savanna ecosystem, rich, complex, teeming. You might ask yourself, what does a desert sound like when it becomes a forest? When the sand no longer sighs, but the leaves rustle, when frogs croak and birds chatter and insects hum beneath a stormy sky. This wasn't just a blip in history, it lasted for thousands of years. A green Sahara was not a fluke. It was a phase, a chapter of Earth's long story. One we rarely speak of, but that shaped the evolution of ecosystems, animals, and humans across the continent. The evidence is everywhere if you know where to look. In pollen cores taken from deep lake beds, we find grasses, acacia, date palms, plants that need steady rainfall. In sediment layers, we see freshwater algae. And in ancient mud layers preserved beneath the dunes, there are signs of seasonal flooding, just like in modern-day wetlands. Even the dunes themselves hold secrets. Buried beneath some of the largest ones are old soils called paleosols that formed during wetter times. Their structure, their minerals, even their faint smell, all tell of a time when the wind was less cruel and the land more generous. The rain shaped everything from the earth beneath your feet to the sky above your head, and it changed the rhythms of life. Elephants and buffalo wandered through grasslands now erased. Crocodiles swam in lakes long dry. Trees lined the shores. Frogs croaked at night. Fish flicked through the shadows of papyrus reeds. You can almost hear it, can't you? Almost see the raindrops making dimples on the water's surface. Imagine waking up to the sound of rainfall in the Sahara. The monsoon wasn't just a climate feature. It was an artist repainting the canvas of North Africa with every drop. The rivers it fed weren't just waterways, they were highways for life, flowing not just with water, but with migration, with growth, with memory. And for the people who lived here, as we'll meet soon, this transformation wasn't unusual. It was normal. To them, the Green Sahara wasn't a miracle. It was home. Tonight, let that idea rest gently on your thoughts. The desert you know today was once a rainforest's cousin, a savanna's sister. Its heart beat to the rhythm of storms. Its soul was soaked in green. And the rain, oh, the rain, it never truly left. It only retreated, as if promising quietly, I'll be back again someday. The wind softens as you drift further into memory, and the horizon begins to shimmer, not with heat, but with history. Where your eyes once saw endless sand, now they trace the graceful curves of something ancient, something lost, riverbeds, wide, winding, beautiful. But these rivers do not flow anymore. They lie beneath your feet, quiet and dry, like the fossils of thoughts once spoken aloud. They were once the arteries of a thriving land, carving through green terrain and nourishing everything that lived here. Imagine standing on the banks of the Tamanrasset River thousands of years ago. It stretches wider than a modern highway, its waters rushing westward across what is now Algeria, Mali, and Mauritania, flowing all the way to the Atlantic. Birds circle above it. Herds gather at its edges. It reflects the light of a sky not yet dulled by dust. And now it's invisible, except from space. Today, satellites like NASA's Terra and the European Space Agency's Sentinel sweep their gaze across the Sahara, and beneath their digital vision, something astonishing appears: long dark streaks buried under dunes, braided patterns etched in the subsurface. These are not illusions. These are fossil rivers hidden beneath meters of sand. The Tamanrasset is the largest of them, but it's not alone. Hundreds of these dry riverbeds, called paleo-channels, crisscross the desert like forgotten roads. They tell us that the Sahara wasn't just damp, it was drenched, laced with streams, tributaries, and floodplains. Pause here and imagine the water flowing again. What would it sound like? Would it rush or murmur? Would you follow it downstream, feeling the cool splash on your ankles as reeds bend and frogs leap? Some of these rivers likely flowed year-round, others filled only in the rainy season. But all of them shaped the land, carving valleys and nourishing ecosystems now buried by dust. Geologists using radar-equipped planes have mapped these channels in astonishing detail. One study revealed over 500 kilometers of a single dry river system, its curves still smooth, its bends still elegant. And deep beneath, the desert water still trickles through some of these pathways, unseen but very real. This leads us to a quiet revelation: not all the water is gone. In fact, beneath the Sahara lies one of the largest underground reserves of fresh water on Earth, the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System. It spans over 2 million square kilometers beneath Egypt, Libya, Chad, and Sudan. That water is ancient, up to 1 million years old, trapped beneath layers of stone and time. It's a memory of rainfall sealed in liquid amber. You might ask yourself, what would it take for those rivers to run again? Would the sky have to shift, the orbit tilt once more? Is it possible, even slightly, that this desert could someday bloom again? Even in silence, the rivers tell stories, and they are not forgotten. In places where these ancient rivers once flowed, you can still find clusters of life oases, tiny bursts of green fed by underground water. Palm trees sway here, and date farms thrive. People settle where the land still remembers how to give. And then there are the signs left by humans: stone tools, hearths, even footprints discovered along the banks of rivers that haven't flowed for thousands of years. People lived here, drank here, cooked fish, and watched the stars above wide waters that are no more. But somehow, even in absence, the water still feels near. The sand doesn't forget. It reshapes, but it doesn't erase. Even now, desert winds occasionally uncover the traces of these rivers, exposing a piece of gravel bed, a chunk of smooth siltstone, or the rust-colored stain where iron-rich water once pooled. And as you glide through this quiet memory, allow yourself to wonder what else lies beneath. What other stories rest just under the surface, waiting to be seen, not with eyes, but with imagination. The fossil rivers are like dreams the desert once had. They wind and turn, circle and meander. And though they no longer flow with water, they flow with something else, proof. Proof that this land has changed before. Proof that it can change again. Tonight you walk dry valleys with wet footprints. You follow water's ghost through a thirsty land. And somewhere in the silence, the river hums beneath the sand. It hums with hope. You pause now somewhere between memory and myth, and the desert begins to glimmer with something new reflection. Not the dry glint of sun on sand, but the soft shimmer of water, catching light pooling in vast, gentle basins. These are the lakes that once held the sky. Let your thoughts glide to the center of the Sahara, where a mighty expanse of water once stretched beyond the horizon. Lake Mega Chad, a name as colossal as the lake itself, once covered more than 400,000 square kilometers, an area larger than modern-day Germany. You stand now on what would have been its ancient shoreline. A warm breeze carries the scent of blooming reeds. Fish ripple just beneath the surface. Dragonflies dart and hover. The lake breathes calm, slow, enormous. This wasn't the only lake. The Sahara, during its greenest centuries, hosted a necklace of freshwater bodies, large and small. There was Lake Fezzan in present-day Libya, a deep basin that collected monsoon-fed waters from the surrounding mountains. And to the east, near modern-day Sudan, Lake Darfur shimmered with life. Each of these lakes was fed by rivers, those same vanished veins you've just wandered, and each supported lush vegetation, thriving ecosystems, and eventually early human communities. But Lake Mega Chad, it was the crown jewel. Let's drift across its surface together. The water is shallow in places, deep in others, up to 160 meters at its deepest. In your quiet glide, you spot traces of what once lived here: fish bones, mollusk, shells, even the fossilized remains of crocodiles that would have lounged along its muddy banks. Think of that for a moment. Crocodiles in the heart of what is now a scorching desert. Not fossils from millions of years ago, but from just a few thousand years past. What would it have felt like to sit beneath a tree on the shore of Mega Chad, the sun warm on your arms, the sky wide and generous? To hear frogs croak and birds call, to hear children splash in water, so vast it met the clouds. This wasn't a tiny miracle. It was a world. And we know it was real because the earth kept receipts. Sediment cores pulled from beneath ancient lake beds show distinct layers of silt and clay, rich in organic material, evidence of calm standing water for centuries at a time. Fossils of aquatic life are plentiful and well preserved. Even the shape of the land, when viewed through digital elevation models, confirms the ancient shorelines like the rings of a drying bowl. You might ask yourself, how long can a lake like that last? How does such vastness simply vanish? It didn't disappear overnight. Lake Mega Chad began to shrink as rainfall decreased. The monsoons weakened. The atmosphere shifted. Slowly, gently, year by year, the waterline crept inward. The land reclaimed itself in quiet degrees. By about 5,000 years ago, the lake had shrunk to a fraction of its former size, dividing into smaller bodies, some drying up entirely. What remains today is Lake Chad, a shrinking pool that spans a few thousand square kilometers, fluctuating with rainfall and use. And yet, even in its diminished state, it whispers of greatness. Local communities still rely on it for life, fishing, farming, watering livestock. And beneath its surface, the sediments still hold clues to the ancient past. Pollen from trees no longer growing there, shells from snails that require clean, fresh water. You look around and realize the lakes may have dried, but they left behind a blueprint. In northern Mauritania, at the foot of the Adrar Plateau, lies a dry basin known as the Guelta d'Arche. Once it was part of a larger lake system. Today, it's one of the few permanent water sources in the central Sahara. Crocodiles still live there, cut off from the rest of their kind, holding on to a sliver of that greener world. Even now, their presence is a quiet protest against forgetting. And if you listen close enough, you'll hear the sigh of the lakes still echoing beneath the desert's surface. Waiting. Waiting in the shape of basins, waiting in the chemistry of the soil, waiting in the memory of clouds. You float across what once was. You feel the coolness, the depth, the generosity of water. And as the stars rise over the desert, imagine the lake rising too. Imagine it spreading again, gentle and slow, not with floods, but with forgiveness. Imagine it reflecting the sky once more. After all, the lakes held more than water. They held possibility. Step softly now as the lakes slip behind you, and the breeze carries something lighter. A rustling, a swaying, a soft hum of leaves in the wind. The desert is behind you for a moment. Before you lies something different, a landscape no longer dry or cracked, but dappled with shade. You are walking beneath the acacia canopy. Here the world feels alive in a way the modern Sahara rarely does. The ground is carpeted in grasses, tall, waving golden green. Patches of wildflowers bloom in low dips, drinking up the last of the season's rain. Birds call from the trees, and in the distance hooves crunch over the earth. This was the green Sahara, a lush savanna stretching across thousands of kilometers, home to woodlands, wetlands, and open plains. Where today only sand survives, back then acacias date, palms, tamarisks, and wild grains flourished. The land didn't just support life, it overflowed with it. You can almost feel the warmth of filtered sunlight on your arms as you stand beneath a tree that once swayed over this very spot. The scent of soil, not dust. The sound of insects buzzing, the soft crackle of seed pods falling. This is not a fantasy. This is a memory rooted in evidence. Fossilized pollen grains preserved in sediment across the region tell a clear story. Botanists have traced them to species that thrive only in moist, temperate climates. Acacias need steady rainfall. So do date palms. And these trees didn't just grow here, they formed entire ecosystems, anchoring communities of plants, animals, and people. The grasses beneath your feet aren't just decorative. They once fed herds of antelopes, gazelles, elephants, and cattle. The roots of wild millet curled through the ground. Papyrus lined lake shores. The Sahara, at its peak of greenness, looked more like modern-day East Africa than any desert we know now. It's easy to forget how quickly landscapes change. So ask yourself this. What if someone had painted a picture of this land 6,000 years ago? Would you recognize it as the Sahara, or would you guess it was somewhere else? Some Eden between rivers and sky. This green period didn't just touch the land. It transformed everything living upon it. With water came abundance. With trees came shade and stability. With plants came grazers, and with grazers came predators. The food web here was as intricate as any forest's interconnected, vibrant humming with movement. The wetlands that lined rivers and lakes hosted frogs, fish snails, and waterfowl. The savannas were home to giraffes stretching for branches, elephants carving trails through grass, and even lions whose roars would have echoed through the night. Imagine sitting by a fire, hearing those sounds in the dark, the splash of a hippo in a nearby pond, the hiss of wind through grass, the sharp cry of a distant bird greeting the dawn. These were not isolated pockets of life. The entire Sahara during the height of its green phase was a continuous living landscape. And the proof remains not only in the soil, but in the art. In the highlands of the Tassili Niger in Algeria and the Ennedi Plateau in Chad, ancient rock shelters still wear their history in color paintings of animals now extinct from the region, scenes of lush vegetation, and even people swimming, yes, swimming in what is now bare stone. What would it be like to find one of those trees today? Just one acacia rooted in the exact same place its ancestor stood 8,000 years ago. Would it still recognize the wind? Would it dream of herds once gathered in its shade? Science tells us this story in data, but imagination brings it to life. Let yourself lie in the grass a moment. Watch the clouds drift lazily above. Hear the buzzing of bees collecting pollen, the calls of creatures now long gone from this region. Feel the rhythm of a land that once pulsed with green. The acacia branches sway gently overhead, their leaves casting soft shadows on your resting thoughts. And as you drift through this memory, let yourself wonder, could it return? Could the trees someday root here again? Could the Sahara cradle life instead of testing it? Perhaps, but for now, just breathe beneath the canopy. Let the trees remember for you. Let the earth rest beneath its memories. Because in this moment, the desert is not dry. It's sleeping, dreaming of green. And now, with the leaves of the ancient canopy still rustling in your thoughts, let's follow a trail in the soil, hoof prints and claw marks pressed into soft earth long gone. The Sahara wasn't just a green place, it was a wild place. The animals who once called it home walked through forests, grazed in open fields, bathed in lakes, and stalked silently through the reeds. Let your imagination take its next soft step forward, and there in the distance they begin to appear. A giraffe, tall and gentle, strides slowly across a grassy plain. Its neck moves like a swan's, reaching for the canopy above. Beneath it, a herd of gazelles scatters lightly through the grass, their hooves kicking up blossoms. From the water's edge you hear a deep grunt, a hippopotamus submerged up to its ears, blinking lazily in the golden light. These weren't rare visitors. These animals lived here, thrived here, raised generations here. And they weren't alone. The Green Sahara was home to elephants, large enough to leave craters in the earth where they walked. There were crocodiles sunning themselves on muddy riverbanks. Buffalo roamed in herds. Even ostriches danced across the plains, their eggs tucked into nests made of reeds and stone. How do we know? Because their bones are still here, scattered beneath dunes, hidden in dry riverbeds, nestled in the dust of forgotten lake shores. Archaeozoologists have uncovered thousands of fossils, jaws, tusks, shells, vertebrae. Some belong to species now found only far to the south, others to creatures whose descendants no longer roam at all. And even more haunting, there are rock carvings, delicate and detailed, etched into cliffs and cave walls by hands long gone. You stand before one now, a line of giraffes, almost life-size, drawn with such precision that you can count the joints in their legs. Nearby, a crocodile glides along the rock, face its tail curling behind it. And there, on the next panel, humans swim alongside them, arms outstretched mid-stroke. Ask yourself, who were these artists? What did they see? What did it feel like to live in a land where animals were neighbors? Not distant myths, but everyday presences. These weren't symbolic animals. They were observed, familiar, loved, and feared. Their stories lived in the same breath as the people who hunted and herded and danced beneath the trees. Even predators left their mark. Lions, likely of the now extinct Barbary subspecies, prowled the edge of the lakes. Hyenas laughed through the night. One stone engraving even shows what appears to be a rhinoceros, its form surprisingly accurate, wide-lipped, bulky, real. Imagine standing still in that moment, hearing the distant trumpet of an elephant and the rustle of grass as something passes unseen nearby. The ecosystem was not just present, it was thriving, balanced, vibrant. And the Green Sahara during its peak may have supported more biodiversity than parts of Europe at the same time. It's startling to think how quickly we forget. Today, when we picture the Sahara, we see dunes and dust. We don't think of the leopard hiding in the brush, the flamingos floating on a freshwater lake, the monkeys chattering from the treetops. But these were real as the fossils they left behind, the footprints still frozen in dried mud, the paintings etched in sheltering stone. And even now, echoes remain. Some species still cling to life in hidden pockets. Crocodiles in deep desert pools, isolated and rare. Addax and Dorcas gazelles, shy and scarce, graze near remote oases. These are the ghosts of a greener time, flickering on the edge of memory. Let yourself lie back now in the tall grass of your mind and listen. The wind brings the rustle of fur, the hush of wings, the distant call of something large moving through the brush. A lion's growl gentle in the distance, not threatening, just real. The Green Sahara wasn't just a place, it was a sanctuary for life, for motion, for balance, for wildness. And as you drift further into this memory, feel the weight of their presence, the grace of their movement, the pulse of their heartbeat in the rhythm of the land. Because once, and not so long ago, the Sahara wasn't a desert, it was a kingdom. From the whisper of paws in the grass to the hush of leaves above, you now begin to sense something more deliberate in this ancient landscape, something sculpted, chosen, remembered. The animals have their place, but there is another presence here, you, or rather, your ancestors. Yes, humans lived in the Green Sahara, not as wanderers lost in sand, but as residents of a paradise in bloom. They built homes near water, carved images into stone, raised children beneath trees that swayed with the monsoon wind. And they left behind a trail of stories not written in books, but in bones, hearths, tools, and art. As you step softly through this land, imagine the distant scent of wood smoke on the air. A circle of stones marks the edge of a cooking fire. Pieces of flint lie scattered in the grass, napped sharp and ready. You pick one up. It fits in your hand, perfectly shaped by someone whose hands were not unlike yours. These weren't primitive people. These were skilled craftspeople, herders, and artists, and they thrived during the Sahara's greenest centuries. Archaeologists have found evidence of widespread human occupation throughout the region dating back 9,000 to 6,000 years ago. Campsites appear near ancient lakeshores. Burials rest beneath stone mounds. Pottery fragments lie nestled in the earth, some painted with elegant patterns, others scorched black from years of use. And the tools, oh, the tools. Arrowheads, scrapers, grinding stones. Implements shaped from flint, obsidian, and quartzite, left in places where today no one walks. These objects tell us of a daily rhythm of fishing, along rivers grinding wild grains, tanning hides beneath the open sky. Some of the most stunning traces come from the Tadrat Caucasus Mountains in Libya and the Tassili Na'ajer of Algeria. These high desert plateaus still wear their history on stone sprawling rock art galleries protected by overhangs telling a visual story of life thousands of years ago. Let your eyes wander across a cliff face. There, painted in earthy reds and soft ochres, are the images of cattle, long-horned, sleek, carefully drawn. They graze, they walk in herds, they're sometimes milked by women with infants on their backs. These were not wild animals. These were part of human families. You might ask yourself, what does it mean that people herded cattle here in the heart of today's desert? What kind of world was this, where the air was wet enough to grow pasture, the lakes clean enough to water a herd? It was a world of agro-pastoralism, an early form of farming and animal husbandry. People grew wild millet sorghum, perhaps even collected fruit from trees. And they built their lives around the rhythm of rain. In some sites, remnants of granaries have been found primitive, yes, but designed with care. And even more striking, the bones of domesticated cattle, sheep, and goats dated to before 5000 BCE. These people didn't just survive here, they thrived. And they carried with them a rich culture, evident in how they buried their dead with beads, carved ivory, and ochre, suggesting spiritual beliefs, reverence, and memory. One particularly moving discovery, a child's skeleton buried beside a small carved animal. A toy, maybe, or a guardian. A sign that even here in the wide breadth of the Sahara, love endured. As the Sahara slowly dried, these communities adapted, migrating with the shrinking water sources, clustering near remaining lakes, some moving southward into the Sahel. But even in retreat, they left behind monuments to their presence. Standing stones, circular enclosures, and endless murals painted on the walls of time. Even now, in the middle of the driest stretches of desert, travelers occasionally stumble upon arrowheads glittering in the sun, or pottery fragments warmed by morning light. Each one a whisper from someone who lived and laughed and labored in this land long before sand ruled it. You might wonder, what stories did they tell around the fire? What songs were sung beneath acacia trees? What did the night sky mean to them when the stars reflected in lakes now long gone? Tonight, those answers aren't lost. They're suspended, waiting. Waiting in the stone, the bone, the brush stroke. So sit now beside their fire. Hear the quiet laughter. Watch the cattle graze in the distance. Let the stories rise from the rocks like embers catching wind. Because the Green Sahara wasn't just a place, it was a home. The embers of ancient campfires still flicker in your thoughts as you walk farther into the heart of this memory. The land, once lush and vibrant, begins to murmur with the soft shift of change. It starts almost imperceptibly, a season just a little shorter, a breeze a bit drier, a stream that doesn't quite reach its usual edge. You're witnessing the beginning of a slow farewell. The greening of the Sahara wasn't forever. Like a breath held too long, it eventually began to release. Not all at once, not with drama or disaster, but gradually, gently, like a lullaby winding down. The rains which had danced across savannas for thousands of years began to retreat. You might picture the first sign as a tree standing alone, where once it had been one of many. Or a lake that shimmered a little less in the sun. Or perhaps just silence where frogs had sung the night before. Why did the green fade? The answer rests again in the skies, specifically in the Milankovitch cycles. As the Earth's orbit gradually shifted and its tilt changed, the northern hemisphere began receiving less intense summer sunlight. This weakened the West African monsoon, which had been the heartbeat of the Green Sahara. With less sunlight heating the land, there was less pull for moist air from the oceans. Year by year, rainfall decreased, rivers thinned, lakes shrank. Trees began to die off at the edges, the acacias and palms giving way to open plains, then scrub, then dunes. But this wasn't an abrupt ending. In fact, in some regions, the transition took over 1,000 years, enough time for people, animals, and plants to adjust or try to. Enough time to notice, enough time to mourn. Imagine what it felt like for the families living near Lake Megachad, watching the water recede, watching fish become harder to find. What does it do to a child's memory when the lake of their early years becomes a muddy pond by adolescence? Archaeological layers show it clearly. In some areas, settlements were abandoned. In others, they shifted toward shrinking water sources. Tools changed. Burial sites moved. People adapted, but slowly, reluctantly, like leaves curling at the edges before falling. This fading was not uniform. Some areas dried faster than others. Parts of what's now Sudan, Mali, and Niger clung to their greenness longer than the central Sahara. In those places, people stayed longer. Animals lingered, trees reached just a little higher. But eventually, even they had to move on. You can still see the footprints in the sand. And what replaced the green? The desert, of course. But not all at once. First, the grasses browned. Then the topsoil dried and lifted in the wind. Dunes began to form, small at first, just ridges on the horizon. Over centuries, they grew taller, stronger, swallowing what came before. The land forgot how to hold water, and so the Sahara became what it is today, the world's largest hot desert, stretching over 9 million square kilometers, an ocean of sand where lakes once shimmered and trees once whispered. But even as it dried, something remained. A memory. A promise, perhaps. Because locked within the soil buried beneath the dunes are the fossils of rain sediment, rich with pollen, ancient clay formed in floodplains, and even groundwater still trickling in hidden aquifers. You might ask yourself, is the desert final? Or could the pendulum swing back? Some climate models suggest that the Sahara could become green again, not next year, not next century, but perhaps in tens of thousands of years when Earth's orbit once again favors stronger monsoons, just as before. And in small ways even now, the land hints at rebirth. In especially wet years, ephemeral lakes form in depressions. Wildflowers bloom along dry wadis. Animals migrate farther north than expected, and the Sahel, the transition zone between the Sahara and sub-Saharan Africa, still pulses with seasonal green, still catches the breath of the past. So tonight, as you walk these quiet trails of time, feel the change not as loss, but as rhythm. The Sahara is not a story of decline. It's a story of transformation, from wet to dry, from green to gold, from past to present. And who knows, perhaps the future, too, holds a whisper of green. Yourself in the company of silence. Not the silence of emptiness, but the heavy, thoughtful hush of memory settling into stone. You're surrounded now by monuments, not towering skyscrapers or temples, but something far older and humbler. Circles of rocks, megaliths worn smooth by wind, standing stones anchored in forgotten soil. These are the human echoes left behind as the Sahara changed. These are the footprints of people who refused to vanish even when the rain did. Pause before one of them. A ring of standing stones sits half buried in sand, their tops barely visible above the dune's shoulder. They look simple at first glance, but their arrangement is precise, aligned with the horizon, with the movement of stars and sun. You are standing in Nabta Playa, one of the oldest known ceremonial sites in the Sahara, nestled in southern Egypt. Nearly 7,000 years ago, people gathered here to observe the sky, bury their dead, and perhaps to speak to whatever gods they believed walked beside them. Long before Stonehenge, they stood these stones upright, forming astronomical alignments that tracked the summer solstice, the rising of Sirius, and the passage of seasons. A desert now, yes, but this place was once a lush basin, its lakes surrounded by wild grass and thorny trees. You crouch and trace a finger across a flat stone sun-warmed even now. How many hands before yours have done the same? Nearby archaeologists have found burials, often of cattle, some placed with care in stone-lined chambers. These weren't just livestock, they were sacred, possibly worshipped, possibly mourned. It's easy to forget that civilization doesn't require cities. Culture isn't born only in marble halls. Here in the Sahara, people mark time with stars, organized space with symmetry, and laid their loved ones to rest in ways that still whisper across millennia. Let yourself walk among these stones as the wind brushes over your shoulders. You are in a desert now, yes, but beneath your feet lies a map of meaning. The sand is just a thin veil over what was once a thriving spiritual world. And it wasn't just Nabta Playa. Across what is now Libya, Chad, Sudan, and Algeria, megalithic structures dot the landscape. Some are tumulus graves, others simple stone markers. Many remain unmapped, their secrets waiting patiently beneath drifting dunes. Others reveal carvings, passageways, hints of rituals lost to time, but not to wonder. Why did these people build? What did they hope to preserve? Ask yourself if your world was changing, if the grass turned to dust, if the lakes dried up. What would you leave behind? A marker, a calendar, a monument to the stars. You might imagine families returning to these sacred spots each year, even as water grew scarcer. The journey becoming longer, the ground harder. But still they came, because here memory lived, community lived. The past was not abandoned, it was anchored in stone. And so through these quiet monoliths, we see not just survival, but continuity. A long thread of human thought stretching across time, drawn across the desert like a line in the sand. Even now, satellites scan the Sahara and find geometric patterns, strange straight lines and circles that make no sense in a purely natural landscape. Some of these are ancient campsites, others the remains of early roadways or ritual paths. The desert may be vast, but it is not empty. As you step further along this journey, the wind tugs gently at your sleeve, as if to say, look back just once more. See how even in the face of drought and departure, people left meaning behind, not in gold, not in stone temples, but in alignment, in ritual, in presence. You are not walking alone. You are following footprints through a vanished savanna, among shadows that remember laughter, grief worship, and sky. Let the stillness wrap around you like a blanket now. The stones are silent, but they are not forgotten. And neither are those who set them in place thousands of years ago under a different sky. The desert has covered many things, but it has preserved them too. The stones fade into the rear of your thoughts, now receding like memories under moonlight. As you continue forward, the stars begin to speak more clearly overhead, and you feel them the oldest navigators, the silent keepers of direction, rhythm, and time. They have always watched this land. They watched it when it was green, and they continue now as it glows with sand. The people of the Green Sahara look to the sky with wonder and practical wisdom. For in a world of shifting seasons and uncertain rains, the heavens became a clock, a compass, and a storybook. Picture yourself lying on your back in tall grass under a sky so dark and clean it pulses with stars. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a great ribbon of light. There are no cities here, no electric glow. The sky is deep and thick with constellations. You might begin to wonder, how did ancient people read this sky? What could they see that we no longer do? Start with Sirius, the brightest star visible from Earth. Thousands of years ago, its heliacal rising the first time it appears on the horizon before sunrise signaled the start of the rainy season. This wasn't just useful, it was life-saving. Entire migrations, planting cycles, and ceremonial calendars were built around that star. And so people watched, not just Sirius, but Orion, whose belt pointed the way across the plains. Canopus low on the southern horizon. The slow, steady turning of the sky provided rhythm when the land began to lose its own. At Nabta Playa, those standing stones you visited earlier, some were aligned to capture this very rising of Sirius. Others may have marked the summer solstice, that pivotal turning point when the sun paused and then began its long return. You can imagine the joy, the reverence of seeing the light return, of knowing the rains might follow. It's likely that stories grew up around these stars. Mythologies whispered from one generation to the next. Some may have personified stars as gods or ancestors. Others may have woven them into tales of animals or spirits who once walked the earth. You pause a moment and gaze upward. What do you see? Perhaps a hunter chasing antelope through the sky. A lion curled beside a sleeping goddess. A crocodile gliding through dark water. The constellations shift slightly in your imagination, blending science with story. Because the sky was not only observed, it was interpreted, loved, and lived with. Even as the Sahara dried, the sky remained constant. A reminder that while lakes may disappear and grasses may brown, the stars will continue their slow, patient turning. And so people turned to them more and more as the land grew uncertain. Nomadic groups moving between seasonal waterholes used the stars to navigate the desert at night. When the sun was too hot and the dunes too featureless, the heavens offered orientation. The stars became guides, just as they did for sailors and traders elsewhere in the world. Some evidence even suggests that prehistoric calendars were based not just on solar events, but lunar cycles and stellar motion. Markings on bones, scratched onto stones patterns, etched into pottery, all hint at an astronomy that was both intimate and essential. So ask yourself, what is it like to live by the sky, to sleep each night under a blanket of stories, to know the season not by a calendar on the wall, but by the arc of a particular star across the early morning dark? In the Sahara, the sky was never just decoration. It was inheritance. It was instruction. You sit now as one of them might have near a quiet fire. The lake has dried. The trees are fewer. But above you, nothing has changed. The stars wheel overhead with the same grace as they did 7,000 years ago. The air is cool. The silence is whole. You feel yourself small but not insignificant, because you too can read the sky. You too are part of this same old rhythm, and maybe that's all we've ever needed to feel at home. With the stars still circling quietly overhead, the wind begins to whisper tales of movement. Not just the drift of dunes or the glide of clouds, but of people. Step now onto a path worn smooth by generations, a road made not of asphalt, but of intent. The green Sahara may have faded, but it had already birthed something remarkable: routes, journeys, and connection. You're walking along one now, though. It isn't marked by signs or fences. It curves through dry valleys and across open plains, linking water to water, past to future. This is one of the prehistoric Saharan trade routes, traveled long before caravans and camels, when the land still held enough life to guide a traveler gently forward. Before the desert fully arrived, these routes served as lifelines between communities scattered across the lush grasslands and lake edges. People moved not just out of necessity, but in search of opportunity. Better grazing lands, new sources of water, an exchange of ideas, goods, and culture. In places like Wadi Howar, once a river stretching across present-day Sudan into Chad, traces remain of ancient movement: stone tools, hearths, fragments of pottery left behind like breadcrumbs. You might pause and pick up one such shard. It's etched with lines, deliberate, decorative, possibly meaningful. Who made this, and where were they going? Evidence shows that as the Sahara slowly transitioned from green to gold, human populations responded not with panic, but with resilience. They adapted. They migrated. Some groups followed the Nile, settling farther along its banks as local rains diminished. Others moved westward into the emerging Sahel belt, where the retreating monsoon still lingered. Still others shifted south toward forests and rivers that offered the promise of a new beginning. And with them, they carried more than belongings. They carried stories, technologies, and even language. Ask yourself, what does it take to carry culture through climate? To keep traditions alive when the very ground beneath you is changing? To pack your world into baskets, onto animals, into memory, and walk? The Sahara became a great corridor, one that would eventually host some of the most legendary trade networks in human history. But long before salt and gold, long before camel caravans, there were footpaths, quiet trails of transition and tenacity. And along these routes, people exchanged not only goods, but ideas. Rock art from different regions begins to show similarities, motifs that suggest shared symbols, themes, even beliefs. Pottery styles migrate, tool types evolve. The Green Sahara wasn't just a collection of isolated communities. It was a network connected by dusted roads and whispering conversations. Even domesticated animals moved across these paths. The spread of cattle herding from eastern to western Sahara mirrors these ancient human highways, showing that knowledge was not hoarded, but shared. And while many of these travelers eventually settled far from their origins, the Sahara remained in them, in their stories, their songs, their designs. In fact, some scholars believe the cultural roots of early Nile Valley civilizations were shaped in part by these Green Sahara peoples. When they moved eastward and clustered along the Nile, they didn't just adapt, they innovated. They brought agricultural skills, spiritual systems, social structures, all nurtured first on savanna soil. It's humbling, isn't it? To think that the heart of a desert once beat with connection, and that the future of entire regions may have been carried forward on tired feet across a drying plain. You pause at a ridge, now looking down at a flat stretch of land once walked by thousands. The wind sculpts the earth into faint waves, as if echoing the movement of travelers long gone. A bead glints in the dust. A bone lies clean in the sun. And you wonder who was the last to walk this way before the sand took over. Did they look back? But even in departure, the Sahara gave something precious movement as meaning. It taught adaptation, flexibility, the art of finding a way when the path is unclear. So walk on quietly, step in rhythm with those who came before, and listen to the desert. Beneath its silence are footsteps still echoing. The trail of ancient footsteps grows fainter, now dusted over by time and the hush of wind. But even as the desert tightens its grip, something curious begins to emerge, not from the earth, but from the minds of those who passed through this place. Where rain once fell and trees once danced, people carried with them not just memories but myths. Here in the waning light of the Green Sahara, your journey turns inward. You're stepping now into the realm of oral tradition, of whispered stories told around firelight of worlds where gods and spirits stirred. The winds coaxed the rains and walked unseen beside their people. Because when the land begins to vanish, the stories stay. Imagine a night not unlike this one, stars glittering overhead, a crackling fire casting gentle light across the faces of listeners young and old. Someone leans in voice soft, telling of a rain spirit who lived in the lake and vanished when humans failed to offer thanks. Or of a lion god, protector of herds whose shadow still lingers in dreams. You ask yourself, where do myths come from, and what do they preserve? Many oral histories from regions bordering the former Green Sahara still echo elements of a more fertile past, legends of lush lands, now lost, of lakes that once covered entire regions, of rivers that sang. Among Tuareg Fulani and Songhai traditions, you'll find fragments of memory woven into metaphor. Some tales speak of deserts that were once forests, of great beasts that once ruled the valleys. Others recount journeys from a land where the stars touch the water. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of a truth passed mouth to mouth, generation by generation, long after the land had changed. Even languages carry these memories. Words for water, fish, or forest sometimes appear in unexpected places, lingering in vocabularies of desert-dwelling communities, like fossils pressed into the grammar. Place names hint at past abundance, even when the features they once described are long gone. And in rock art, the stories become visible. You find yourself standing before a mural that shows a human figure dancing beneath falling lines, perhaps rain, perhaps sunlight. A spiral marks the sky above. Around them, animals look on: giraffes, elephants, even birds. Is it a literal scene? A ritual moment? A story passed into stone? No one can say for sure. But the continuity of symbolism, from stone to story to silence, feels deliberate. As the Sahara-dried myth became memory's refuge, people turned to the gods for answers. Why had the rain stopped? Had they been forgotten? Angered, punished. In the absence of understanding, myth filled the gaps with meaning, with beauty, with reassurance. One haunting example comes from the Serer people of Senegal, whose oral histories speak of a migration from a once fertile homeland far to the north, a place of green hills and open skies, abandoned only when the sky changed. Was this metaphor, or an ancestral whisper of the green Sahara's fading? Even today, as sand covers stories and time presses forward, there are still those who remember. Elders in Saharan communities speak of lands their ancestors once described as teeming with game, shaded by trees. They may not name the Holocene or refer to orbital shifts, but the essence remains: this place was not always dry. And in that idea, there is power. Because myth doesn't just preserve the past, it helps shape the future. If we can remember a greener Sahara, even through symbols and songs, then we can also reimagine what the world might become again. So now, as you sit by this imagined fire, eyes half closed in the flicker of fading flames, ask yourself, what story would you carry forward from this place? What shape would your memory take? Would it be a lion roaring across the stars? A lake that sings your name? A wind that once smelled of grass? Let it linger just a little longer. Because even if the rain has stopped, the story never does. From stories wrapped in starlight, you find yourself wandering now into deeper stillness. The land is quieter here. The grasses are mostly gone. The lakes are memory. But what lies beneath your feet, what hides under layers of time, is still very much alive with secrets. Because the green Sahara didn't vanish entirely. It simply retreated below the surface. Step gently and listen. The earth here holds water, not puddled or flowing or singing in rivers, but locked within stone, resting in ancient chambers deep underground. The Sahara may seem dry, but underneath it lies one of the largest fossil aquifers in the world. Imagine that a vast buried sea, silent and unmoving, formed during those lush, rainy centuries. It's called the Nubian Sandstone Aquifer System, and it spans more than 2 million square kilometers beneath parts of Egypt, Libya, Chad, and Sudan. Let your imagination sink down with it. The water there is tens of thousands of years old, laid down during the Holocene wet phase, when rain still swept across these lands and rivers fed floodplains without end. Some of this water is as old as 125,000 years, resting since the last interglacial period. You might ask yourself, what does it mean for a desert to be built on water? For the hottest, driest place on Earth to have once been saturated with life? Satellite imagery and radar technology have revealed paleochannels, ancient buried riverbeds that once carved their way through the Sahara, hidden now under hundreds of meters of sand. These ghost rivers are braided like veins beneath the skin, suggesting a time when water didn't just visit this land, it shaped it. And more than that, it stayed. Today, some desert oases still draw from these ancient reserves. The Siwa Oasis in Egypt, the Fazan Basin in Libya. These are living fossils, green blooms in a golden sea, watered by the breath of a long-departed sky. Even more astonishing, deep in the central Sahara, isolated populations of Nile crocodiles still survive in remote rocky pools called gueltas. They are remnants of a once thriving wetland ecosystem, marooned by time yet alive. A whisper of the past blinking slowly beneath the sun. These aren't just curiosities. They're clues, living footnotes to the story we've been unraveling together. And as scientists continue to study the region using ground-penetrating radar sediment analysis and climate modeling, the map of the old Sahara grows ever more detailed. We are reconstructing a landscape lost not to disaster, but to time's quiet turning. Think about that. The Sahara didn't end with a bang. It faded gently, almost politely, as if excusing itself from the stage. And even as it left, it preserved what had been tucking away seeds of memory beneath dunes and stone. There are still fossils to be uncovered, villages, yet to be discovered rock art, hiding in canyons no one has entered in centuries. Each find is a doorway back to that improbable paradise, that lush heart of what we now call a wasteland. And here is the thought that lingers like a soft breeze. The Sahara is not dead. It is dormant. It holds the memory of monsoons, the shape of lakes, the quiet bones of lions, the smooth shards of bowls once filled with grain. Even the very sand itself, grains carried by wind from the highlands of the past, is made of stone worn down by rivers now long gone. Every dune is a library of what came before. And while the surface bakes under the sun, the deep earth remains cool, dark wet, remembering. So you walking quietly here at night, listening to the pulse of time below the ground, might wonder what else sleeps beneath the desert. What stories remain hidden, patient waiting. You pause beside a dry wadi, its walls carved long ago by running water. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear it again, the rush, the splash, the laughter of children playing at the banks. It's not gone, it's just buried. The Sahara is a palimpsest, a scroll written and rewritten, each new word laid atop the faded ink of the last. And now, in this final quiet moment of exploration, you're beginning to read between the lines. And now your journey has brought you to the final edge, not of the desert, but of a long, slow exhale through time. You've walked where grass once danced, followed rivers carved by forgotten rains, and stepped beside the shadows of ancient people who call this place home. But before we settle into stillness, there is one more question waiting in the quiet. Could the Sahara turn green again? It's a dreamlike thought, isn't it? As though a sleeping giant might stir, stretch, and blossom. And yet, in a strange and subtle way, the answer is yes. Maybe. Eventually. Because the forces that once turned this vast desert into a fertile paradise still exist. The Sahara didn't become green by accident. It responded like everything on Earth to the rhythm of the cosmos. Remember the Milankovitch cycles, those gentle shifts in Earth's orbit and tilt. They're still turning, still nudging the planet toward long, slow climate changes. And in about 10,000 to 15,000 years, some scientists believe the Sahara will once again begin to green. The rains will return not overnight, not with a single storm, but gradually season by season. Grass will creep northward. Shrubs will sprout in old wadis. Lakes may begin to refill just as they once drained. It's hard to imagine looking out over dunes and bare plains. But buried pollen samples, ancient lake beds, and simulations all suggest the same. The Sahara is not a fixed state. It's a cycle, a breath, a phase in a planet's long story. Still, it's not just orbital mechanics that matter now. Human activity, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, land use changes has introduced new variables into the system. The climate of the future is not just shaped by stars and sun, it's shaped by us. You might pause here and wonder, could humans help guide that green return? Could reforestation projects, water harvesting techniques, or solar-powered desalination become tools to coax life back into the edges of this great desert? In places like the Sahel, where desert meets grassland, people are already trying. The Great Green Wall Project aims to plant trees across 8,000 kilometers from Senegal to Djibouti to halt desertification and restore ecological balance. It's a human-scale echo of the Sahara's ancient rhythms, and yet there's no rushing nature. The Sahara may green again, but it will take thousands of years, countless turns of the seasons, and perhaps a gentle nudge from those who walk its edge with care. Until then, it rests, and so do you. You sit now at the border of memory and imagination. The stars are brighter than before. The wind is cooler, whispering lullabies in a language as old as rain. You've wandered through lakes long gone, listened to the footsteps of cattle, and watched the sky turn like a great wheel. And here at the end, with sand between your fingers and the scent of ancient rain in the air, you realize the Sahara is not just a place. It's a mirror that reflects our capacity for change, for adaptation, for resilience. A mirror that reminds us how delicate and powerful Earth's rhythms can be. And a mirror that every now and then shows us what once was and what could be again. You close your eyes now. The stars continue their slow wheel above you. The desert exhales. Beneath the sand, water sleeps. Within the silence, stories hum. And within you, perhaps a seed of wonder waits to bloom. Let yourself settle now. There's no more need to travel to question, to wonder. Just breathe. Let each breath sink a little deeper into your chest, as though you're drawing in the calm of those ancient rains, the hush of a lake in the morning mist, the quiet of a world before time hurried. Imagine the feel of warm sand beneath you, soft, dry, a little cooler now as night fully drapes itself across the desert. There are no more steps to take, no more secrets to uncover tonight. Just the echo of what you've seen, and the softness of what you feel now. The wind has slowed. The stars have begun to blur, not from clouds but from heavy eyelids. Let them blur. Let them drift. The green Sahara is still there in memory, in myth, in stone, and maybe someday in the world again. You've journeyed far tonight, through time, through landscapes, through lives, and you did so gently with wonder. Let the sand hold you now. Let the stillness grow. If you've enjoyed this journey, I'd be quietly grateful if you'd give this video a like or tap that subscribe button for more peaceful explorations with the Sleepy Scientist. It helps more than you might imagine. And before you drift off, I'd still love to know, where in the world are you listening? From what time it is there? Leave a comment if you're feeling cozy enough to share. It's always a quiet joy to see this sleepy little community ripple across time zones and continents. Good night, sweet dreams.